beginning of the Holocene, when the Folsom people were around. And sure enough, insulation was at its peak with the temperatures. Now, when we put that over biomass and methane, when plants grow and die, they release methane. When there are lots of plants, they're going to release more methane. And this is what you see here. Notice that it pretty well tracks with the amount of solar energy coming in. When it was cold, not much methane. When it's warm, there's a lot. But here's the kicker. Now look at this. The temperatures dropped 18 degrees Fahrenheit right at the height of insulation. When it was warmest and the most sunlight was reaching the Earth, bang, went back into the Ice Age conditions. So that's extremely strange. And the odd thing is that in 1.8 million years, where we've been going through these cycles of ice ages, it's never happened before like that. So it's completely counterintuitive. Most sunlight reaching, and yet it got bitterly cold. So the question is why? Okay, and let's look at the cycle of all the glaciations, and you can see a little clearer. This has come from the Vostok ice core. It's about 400,000 years of temperatures, and they put proxies of cold. They look at CO2 and methane. And the way the ice age cycles work, there's a brief warm period called an interglacial, and then long periods of cold in between. The ice ages average about 100,000 years in length, and there's just this brief little time, usually 10, 20,000 years tacked on the end of it when it gets warm, and that's exactly what we're in now. We're in this interglacial. You can see off to this edge, that's us right there. So CO2 is up, and so we're in one of the few periods when life on Earth has been reasonably benign. It's pretty cold the rest of the time. Okay, so here's the interesting thing. At each ice age, temperatures plunged at the end of it. In fact, they dropped 13 degrees C, 125,000 years, 10, 240, 16, and 15. And there's the younger Dryas in Antarctic. It only dropped 5 degrees, and yet animals went extinct in South America too. So if cold did it, why in the world would this little blip of cold kill them when every one of those ones that are higher didn't kill them? So the extinction seemed relatively unique to a mild younger Dryas. So once again, why? Anomaly number 3 is the Clovis adaptation. So these people were making these beautiful spear points with the flutes to them. All of a sudden, they disappeared, and in came a new kind of technology, Folsom, redstone, other names. Questions why? Was it because there were no more mammoths, so they just changed their point style, their climate to them in, or was it the comet? So let's take a look at the evidence. Here's something curious in Alaska. When we take a look at the work done by Dale Guthrie, he looked at a number of different animals, and he found that there were 3 things that happened. There were bottlenecks, meaning the populations declined. They didn't go extinct, but there were fewer of them. They migrated, or they went extinct, one of 3 things. And all of these things come into play in Alaska. You can see the mammoths, they disappeared right at that point. The horse disappeared then. The bison made it through. As you know, there are bison around today, but several of the species that were well known back then are gone. And you can see there were a lot of them in Alaska up until that dotted line, and then not many after. The elk were migrants who came in, and they had a big population explosion, and then they went through a big bottleneck too. And the same with the moose. The moose were not in Alaska throughout most of the ice age, but they came in, once again, they got hit, got whacked by something. And oddly enough, people did the same thing. You see how people show that they came into Alaska, there's nothing before the blue line there. They expanded, populations were growing, then all of a sudden, a bottleneck. Just like the bottle says, populations declined, but then they rebounded. And there's the YD event, right at the same time, 12,900 years ago. Now, this is in radiocarbon years, which are a little different scale, but it's the same time. So mammoths and horses went extinct, or maybe some of them moved. There are horses that existed beyond this point elsewhere. But bison, moose, elk, and people declined, but they survived. But if the cold did it, why do you see this contraction at the line but then they expand out after it. So it was really cold, and yet their populations were growing again. And then let's look and see if we can find something in the people down on the continent here. Here's the redstone points. I mentioned that. Most people agree that redstone came after Clovis. There's a different way of making the points, very distinctive. They were mostly in Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, southeastern part of the U.S. Look what happened to them. One of our co-authors took a look at the amount of people living in South Carolina, if we can believe that points are a proxy for people. Obviously, if there are 10 times more people, they're probably going to be making a lot more points. So the idea is that it's a proxy for them. When you take a look at this, you can see that in South Carolina, there were lots of Clovis people, especially along the rivers. Then redstones were just 200 years, 500 years later, almost nobody there. So, and these were the only known inhabitants post-Clovis. And here's the 2 points that you can see. The redstone has a longer flute, usually half or 2/3 of the way. Clovis are usually shorter, but other than that, they look pretty similar. But they're very different. Anybody who knows how to make points knows that the same technology did not make those 2 points. Let's take a quick look at what happened to the people in Virginia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. You can see the ratio of Clovis points there. We have about 8 in Virginia. See right up there, about 8 up there, and only 1 redstone. And it's a little bit better in the Carolinas, but still almost 5 and 3 to 1. So clearly, if points are proxy for people, there just weren't as many people around. So the question is why? Was it due to the cold? It was cold in the Younger Dryas. Maybe the populations declined. And of course, we think it was the impact. Let's take a look at the plains population. Now, most people assume that the people on the plains were expanding. And we take a look at comparing Folsom to Clovis sites, and some of them you can see they're saying Agate Basin, Blackwater Draw, Hell Gap, Lubbock Lake. They have Clovis and Folsom occupations there. But here's the curious thing: when you look at the Clovis sites, and these are bend by 50-year bends to show that if there's more likely to be a lot of people there, we capture it in a bend better. But you can see there's this huge peak in Clovis right there, and that comes out right out about 11,000 years ago, and then it drops down. And of course, the YD impact was right at that point, came right after it. So at all the sites where the dating is exact, the impact came right after. The big peak in population, and not too many Clovis people around afterwards. These are the Folsom sites, and there are 20 of them that are well dated. See, they all go across there, but they're just 9 Clovis, no more than 3 Folsom. So we think that indicates there was a population decline on the plains too. Something happened that made it so those people either weren't around, or maybe they went to vacation in Florida. A lot of things could have happened. But at any rate, they weren't on the plains, apparently. So we thought, well, maybe they're just too few dated sites, so let's really look at the proxies. So let's look at the points and see how they stack up. This is the territory at which there are known Folsom points. It covers about 21 states. And when we look at the plains population decline, if we average per 100 years the number of Clovis points, then here's what we get. We find there are 1,120 Clovis points over a couple thousand Folsom. And here's what it looks like. So they're up about there, roughly a little under 300 points every 100 years. So if it's a proxy for people, there it is. But look at Folsom. So they were around for 12